Gas fitter exam cram session, video 25. Okay, so we were on question 15, page 41. Before we do that, the whole point of this was that it's just a chance to make a number, do more work for us. So, 2. What about 2? 2 psi or less, purge, fuel gas, indoors, 2 elbow swing. We go off the main, off the riser, doesn't matter. Okay? 2 and 2. Concealed gas piping should not be installed in solid partitions and solid walls unless installed in a chaser casing. Okay? Concealed gas piping, well, it can be in a sheetrock wall, a plaster wall. It could be running overhead, an attic. It's concealed. It's not accessible. You can't see it. If we're running it in solid partitions and walls, in other words, you're running gas piping in a pour, okay? Like you're going to pour walls or whatever. You can't put your piping there and, even if you wrapped it to protect it against the cement itself, you can't just pour. No. If this is a cement wall, within the cement wall, there's got to be a chase or a dedicated casing that the piping is inside, such that it doesn't worry about the load, the stress, the pressures, or contact with the cement. The casing or the chase is some kind of hollow passageway, some kind of track for the piping itself. You can do that, but you can't just run piping and just pour and it sits in there. Not acceptable. Okay, so concealed gas piping, no solid partitions and solid walls unless within that wall you have a chaser casing that the piping is running within. Question 42. Gas piping installed in solid floors using a Schedule 40 pipe casing. Remember we said that we can install piping in solid floors, or we can install piping underneath in a conduit. It's the conduit they want. They want Schedule 40 pipe. Schedule 40 pipe casing shall have the ends of such casing extend not less than, I wonder what the number's going to be. How lucky that these questions just happened to be next to each other to reinforce this number, right? Wow. Not less than 2 inches above the floor. Okay? That sleeve, that casing, that conduit that we talked about when we were not allowed to run piping underneath the building unless it was in a sleeve. And then when it comes up to the floor, that sleeve's got to be at least 2 inches above the floor, and the piping's coming through 2 inches. So we got another 2. Okay, 2, and 2. Okay, so 2 inches above floor. So conduit, casing. All right, conduit, casing, 2 inches above floor. So 2 elbow swing, 2 psi, 2 elbow swing, 2 inches above, 2, and 2. Okay, so the number 2 is doing triple duty today. Okay, 2 psi or less, fuel gas purging indoors. 2 elbow swing off the horizontal main riser. 2 inches above floor for conduit or casing, whatever you're using to run the gas pipe in places that you normally would not be allowed. But you got your Schedule 40 casing, right? So you can do it. Question 17. Exterior above ground gas piping must be elevated not less than 3.5 inches above ground and roof surfaces. We just had that question. Got it again. Repetition. Question 18. underground gas piping shall be installed a minimum of 24 inches below grade. 2 feet below grade. Okay? What was the exception we had? That if it's not under a driveway, and of course we properly protect it, we can, we don't have to dig a 2-foot trench. We can dig an 18-inch trench, right? Or a trench that allows the gas piping to be to the top of the pipe, 18 inches, of course. Because when do we have, we say these numbers, how deep it's got to be buried, but it's got to be buried so that, let's take it from, sometimes it's good to put yourself in other people's spots. So the operating engineer on the backhoe, he's going to know that, I should start worrying about a gas line at, if this is a driveway, I know I definitely don't have to worry about a gas line until 2 feet deep. That's when you got to worry about hitting it. If you dig 2 feet to the bottom of the trench, but you put your gas line in, and it's a 2-inch gas line, well, already you're wrong because it's 18 inches to the top. It's like, no, you want to the top. So in here, 2 feet to the top. The previous question, 3.5 inches to the bottom of the pipe, of course. You think about these, it kind of makes sense. You see like, oh, well, in real life, what is it I'm looking for? I'm looking to protect the pipe. The protection comes for 3.5 if the pipe is 3.5 inches above the surface. For underground pipe, the protection comes if the top of the pipe is at 18 to 24. Question 19. The unthreaded portion of gas piping outlets must extend not less than 1 inch beyond finished ceilings and walls. Okay? What is the difference with this? Okay, they're talking about, see, because we got 2 inches for the conduit or the casing that the pipe is traveling through and coming out of. That's 2 inches. So what's up with this 1 inch? Okay. And we'll take the most basic example, all right? When we're running the gas piping, the supply to a range, it's going to be at least 3/4. And for the sake of argument, we're going to say it is 3/4, okay? So, here's our stove. Here's the wall. Here's the pipe, 2 elbow swing. Our appliance, shut-off valve, and our flexible connector. I'm going to say this is 3/4 inch, all right? And we're coming out of the wall, okay? And here's our elbows, okay? How far do you come out of the wall? Well, you come out of the wall to put one elbow, nipple, another elbow, nipple valve, connector, right? You come out of the wall, what you need to come out of the wall, but never less than 1 inch of the non-threaded portion. So, if we're at the wall, and we're coming out of the wall, and this is our pipe, right? This is our pipe coming out of the wall, and this is our threaded portion. This section here, from the wall, where it's coming out to the threaded portion, or just the black of the pipe, it's got to be at least 1 inch. Okay, so you got to have 1 inch of non-threaded pipe outside of the wall. Threads are extra. Whatever the threads are, the threads are. For a 1 inch pipe, the threads is going to be 7/8 long. So, at the very least, if this was a 1 inch pipe, 1 inch and 7/8 of pipe has to stick out. But we're doing a stove, so for a stove, what's the length of the threads? 3/4 of an inch. So, 1 inch and 3/4 should stick out. Would that be a question on the exam? There's really no math on the exam. requires some kind of calculating, but you know, it would be a good question. I doubt they would ever ask a question like that, but now that I mention it, it's like kind of is a good question to see how much you know, because one, it's code, and two, it's your table. So if, for the sake of argument, we'll make that question now. What is the shortest amount of pipe, of 3/4 pipe, the code would allow to stick out of a wall, you know, to make your connection? The shortest piece of pipe would be, because we must have an unthreaded portion of at least 1 inch, and then, since this is the stove and 3/4 of an inch worth of threads, the shortest amount sticking out from the wall would be 1 3/4 inches. Advanced question, but helps us review this, and at the same time, this is new. We haven't hit this question yet, but for any pipe, let's see, for gas piping outlets. So it could be for any size piping, because the outlet is going to be whatever size you need. A unit might need only a 1/2 inch. A unit might need 1 inch pipe, etc., etc. Okay, it just happens to be, if we're talking about ranges, we established it's got to be 3/4, but 1 inch threaded portion. Now, why 1 inch? This will help you remember it even better. Why 1 inch? Because that's the minimum you need to get your wrench on. Because, well, this pipe is sticking out of the wall, right? This is a thread, right? You're going to spin an elbow on there, because then you got to spin a nipple, an elbow, and whatever else on there, right? You're not just going to put the fitting on there and wrench that fitting on there, right? You know, you run the chance of, like, if you're wrenching it on, or let's say you're trying to take it off, somewhere in the wall is another threaded joint. You're going to mess it up. You know we're always going to hold back. What are you going to hold back on? If all you did was stick out enough for threads, you have nothing to hold back on. With at least 1 inch of unthreaded pipe, you're holding back on that. So you need at least 1 inch of unthreaded portion to properly hold back, whether you're making up or taking off the fitting. That should also help you remember 1 inch. Okay. Question 20. The unthreaded portion of gas piping outlets must extend not less than how many inches above floors, outdoor patios, and slabs? Okay, it's 1 inch when we're talking about ceilings and walls. Okay, so ceiling, wall, not less than 1 inch. But what about, you know, let's say for they say outdoor patio, so I'm already thinking, you know, your grill. You know, you built your own outdoor grill, brick and everything. Awesome. For that, you didn't want to go with the propane tank. You want to go with a nice connection to your gas, a dedicated line to there. So your pipe is sticking up through the patio flooring. So how much of that should stick out? 2 inches. They want 2 inches of unthreaded portion. Okay, and once again, that's for making up. And when you're holding back against the floor, it, you know, I would guess you need a little more, you know, a little more room for the wrench. Also, once again, it's the floor, so 2 inches puts the threads higher, 1 inch higher. And you know, it's the threads are going to get that much less corrosion, because on the floor there's more buildup of water and stuff to corrode the threads than on the wall and the ceiling. So 2 numbers we got to remember, and I erased all the other 2s because now 2 has quadruple duty. But 2 inches unthreaded portion from the floor, 2 inches the conduit's got to stick up above the floor, 2 psi or less to purge with fuel gas. And what was the other? Oh, 2 elbow swing, right? Okay. Page 43, question 22. What is prohibited from being used for testing gas piping? Oxygen. Okay, let's look at the others. Air. Air is air. You pump it up with a bicycle pump. Air is air. Okay, so that's good. Air you can use. Nitrogen. Nitrogen is an inert gas. You can use that. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an inert gas. Carbon dioxide is in your soda. Okay, you can use that. Oxygen, no. Oxygen is, it is not a flammable gas, but it is an oxidizer. Whatever you got burning, whatever combustion you got going on, you put oxygen in it, it makes it that much better, and depending on your take on the situation, that much worse, that much dangerous. Okay? No oxygen. Oxygen will just, if there was a chance for something bad to happen as far as fuel gas and combustion and boom, oxygen would just make it that much worse. No oxygen for testing gas piping. 23. The test duration for a gas piping system with a distribution pressure over 5 psi through 15 psi. So in our mental shorthand, we say 15, okay, is 1 hour. All right. Let's do the table again. This is one of the tables that I would say if the most, let's start prioritizing. Everything's important. It's just some things might be a little more important than others. What is the most important table? What is the table that you definitely will get asked, and you will get asked the most questions from? I would say the gas testing pressure table. So, you got to hit this one perfect. And the other one's perfect as well. But this one is the one I fear the most. This one is the one I like to go in and just, I know it better than my name. Okay? So, we dealt with 1 inch for ceilings and walls, 1 inch unthreaded portion. For the floor, you know, whether it's a slab, outdoor patio, etc., 2 inches of unthreaded portion. Mainly for being able to hold back with a wrench, and in the floor's case, to add that egg to keep it that much higher off the floor, so the threads don't get corroded. Table. So, 5 psi through 15. All right, the 5 psi through 15, over 5 psi. We kind of don't need the 5 psi anymore because, well, we already know it's like, all right, over, but up to 15. 15 is the mental trigger for that level of numbers. So, what were the numbers again? Well, 3 for 30, 50 for 30. After 30, 1 hour. Okay? 15. 15 gives us 15 at 15 was an hour over. 15, 100 for an hour. Over 2 times. Okay? This is good right now. If you can do this right now, if it just automatically comes out right now, and these two, we've done it so many times that we know it's half and 5. So half, 5, 15, over. 3 for 30, 50 for 30, 100 for 1. Twice, but definitely the same thing. You know, at the very least, it's got to be this, but twice, whatever, twice. And then, in future iterations, you can add the, if it's over 125, what do? 50% strength of the pipe. There's a lot of words and everything, but I think we can get away with just, okay, 50% strength of the pipe. The word in the question is going to veer towards strength of the pipe. But at 125, 50% of strength of the pipe. Okay? And then the extra ones, coated and wrapped. Coated and wrapped. 90 psi. Use water. Water test. Use water as a testing medium. Over 100. Okay? Over 100 psi. These you can add later. These don't fit as perfectly, but the first two that should always come out is we got half, then we got 5, so over half to 5. Then what's the next increment? Over 5 to 15. That's what this one happens to be. And then over 15 2 times. So 3 for 30, 50 for 30, 100 for 1. Double. Boom. There's your table. So out of all of these, when we saw that the number that's going to trigger us is the 15, yeah, 15. The test duration is an hour. Because there's only 2 times, and I know what you're thinking, but for the sake of for a mental trigger, there's only 2 times we're using 30. After that, we go an hour. But of course, corridor piping, 10 psi for 30 minutes for that section of piping. But remember, we're never allowed, the only reason we can do that, run the piping to corridor, was we were dealing with a half psi system. So technically, in my mind, it kind of falls under the half, okay? So I really don't count it as a third. You can count it as a third, but kind of put it with here in that it's going to be for half psi if you want. You could say 3 for 30, except that corridor piping is 10 for 30, okay? But it's still in the half, so we always want to eliminate as much possible and then bring out the extra flourishes, when we have to. Just for the sake of we always remember it easily and without any difficulty and with a decent amount of confidence when we do, okay? So 1 hour for the 15. 15 is an hour. How much? 100. Okay, 24. Oh, see? All factory applied, coated, and wrapped gas pipes shall be pressure tested at a minimum of 90 psi. 90 psi, coated wrap. Question 25. Okay. I said there are no pictures on the exam. There are no pictures on the exam. I put this in here. Why did I put this in here? For a couple reasons. One, I felt it wouldn't hurt you to know what the name of the vent terminal is. The code describes it as a vent terminal. You could say cowl. The main purpose of the vent terminal is to prevent the entry of insects. And as you can see in this vent terminal here, that you have that little fine mesh there to keep insects from going in. So what's the name of that? There is a name to it. It's called the PEC vent. Okay, is that going to be on the test? I highly doubt it, but for some reason I just felt, you know what? It's just something you should know. It helps flesh out your memory. So there you go. Now you know the name. Now you know what that's called. Okay. Question 26. High pressure natural gas installations of 15 psi or above. It's almost a redundant statement because we know that, high pressure gas is 15 psi or above. If we wanted to be pedantic about it, in other words, nitpicking, because now we're getting to be experts on this, you could say the sentence didn't need that. You could just say high pressure natural gas installations. We know enough to know that the minute you say high pressure, it is 15 psi above. Shall also comply with the requirements of which appendix? What did I say? Meters is E, meter for appendix E. So there's only one other letter, G, appendix G for high pressure gas. So appendix G. 27. All inspections shall be performed at the sole cost and expense of the owner. The owner shall perform the inspections, shall pay for the inspections. Does that mean that the owner is going to be the one to actually show up, set everything up, blah, 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 this and this, that? No, the owner, but that's implied also the owner's agent or a person designated by the owner. In other words, the plumber the owner hired will do the testing and everything. But because the plumber is acting for the owner, the code specifically states that it is the owner. And more in that, well, just to say that, if you expect the Department of Buildings to come down and do all the work and pay all the bills for the inspection, you're out of your freaking fucking mind. No, they just come down and check it if they come down. You can also have a third-party certification. And under third-party certification, well, no, it wouldn't be, because the master plumber is working on behalf of the owner. So third-party certification, or the master plumber can self-inspect if the Department of Building deems it so. But blanket statement: all inspections shall be performed at the sole cost and expense of the owner. Okay? Master plumber, maybe, if the owner pays him and asks him. Department of Buildings, never. This is the city we're talking about. The superintendent of construction. We'll call him the GC, the general contractor, GC, right? Possibly, but once again, because that's what was agreed upon when the owner and the GC sat down and said, this is what is going to happen and this is what it's going to cost. Okay, 28. Underground inspection shall be made before backfill is put in place. Kind of makes sense. I mean, how the hell can you inspect? I mean, you could test a piece. Let's say you backfill. You could test the piping. It can hold. But how do you know the scope of the piping? How do you know the test is legitimate? So you can't backfill, You backfill, it's like, well, either you didn't read the code, you just planned everything poorly, or worse, because this is where their mind goes to, you're trying to hide something. All right? The city will never believe you're innocent. I know you didn't do it on purpose, but the first thing that pops into the city's head is you're trying to scam them, you're trying to get away with something, blah, 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 blah. Question 29. Rough-in inspection shall be made before. Rough-in is when the walls aren't up yet. Okay, the floor's poured, but the walls aren't up yet. The stuff that's in the walls got to be there, stuck out. Then the walls will go up, right? But the fixtures aren't going on. The appliances aren't connected. So the rough-in, okay, before the walls go up, before anything is concealed, you need an inspection. So that when the test is being run, the inspector determines the scope of all the work that's being tested and can see for himself that the test is actually testing that piping, okay? So rough-in inspection shall be made before the installation of wall or ceiling membranes, okay? Before anything, in other words, before anything's covered up, okay? Because then it's called concealed, and that's a whole other story, right? And once again, the mind's going to go, what are you trying to conceal? What are you hiding? What are you worried about, right? People make mistakes, but the city doesn't think you make mistakes. The city thinks you're a fucking criminal, okay? That's the first place their mind goes. Question 30. Tests shall be made by the permit holder and witnessed by the department or an approved agency, third-party certification. So it's going to be made by the permit holder. Who's the permit holder? Usually the owner, okay? But they don't use the word owner. They just use the word permit holder, okay? Because the permit holder could be the owner. Could be the master plumber, possibly. Maybe the master plumber went and obtained the permit on behalf of the owner. But whoever's holding the permit, the test is going to be made by the permit holder. Okay? And this, I would say,